It's a kingdom filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder, a confederacy built to serve the people and the state, and it's one of the most prosperous empires in Sub-Saharan history. Let us look to West Africa, to a state of wealth, just laws, and power, that fought against colonization to stay alive to the present day. Let's delve into the Asante Empire. Two notes before we begin. Firstly, I have gotten only some of my pronunciations cleared, not all, so I apologize if I butcher any names or places. I am not native to the region. Secondly, the word Ashanti and the word Asante are realistically the same thing, used interchangeably. However, Ashanti is the modern day term, and Asante, the term I will be using in this video, is the historical term. Part 1. Our story begins, well, that's our first problem. There isn't really a beginning point to this story. The Asante Empire began around 1700 CE. However, the people have lived on this land, formed kingdoms of their own, and had their own stories for centuries before. So for the sake of brevity, we will begin with the migration of the Akan people. They came from the west. How far west? Uncertain. When exactly? Sometime from the 13th century onwards. What we do know is that when they arrived on the coast of modern-day Ghana, they began to form their own independent kingdoms through the coming centuries. The Kingdom of Bonaman was established as the largest and most powerful in the region. It was a large trade kingdom that exerted its influence over the rest of the states. It was also the first main trading partner with the Portuguese when they initially arrived on the Gold Coast in 1471. However, as the years ticked by, their influence gradually fell to those surrounding them. The Denchira rose against the Kingdom of Bonaman and quickly secured hegemony over the other southern Akan states that were forming sometime in the early 17th century. With the gold mines in the south secured by the Denchira, trade with the Europeans on the Gold Coast monopolized by the Fante Kingdom, and the west secured by Akwamu, the Bonaman Kingdom declined in power and prestige until it was almost non-existent. One of the clans under Denchira rule was that of the Oyoko, centered around the vital city of Kumasi. Kumasi was a perfectly positioned city. It was a central trade junction to the rest of the area. King Ose Tutu, following the dreams of his uncle, the former king Obiri Yeboah, planned a war to overthrow Denchira rule and gain independence for the Asante. However, the most prevalent thing was to first gain legitimacy over all the Asante states. Legend has it that Ose Tutu's priest and advisor conjured a golden stool from the heavens that fell into the king's lap, imbued with the spirit of the Asante people. Taking the title Asante Hene, he created a confederation with the surrounding Akan states and selected Kumasi as the capital. With alliances made, Ose Tutu waged war against the Denchira. Ose allowed the Denchira king to gain ground in order to ambush him at the Battle of Feyase. With the Denchira Hene killed in a battle shortly after, the Denchira hegemony was broken and the Asante Empire began its reign on the Gold Coast. In its early days, the Asante Empire was a war-oriented state. Ose Tutu died later in a campaign against the Akyem, another Akan state. Opoku Ware, the new Asante Hene, made an oath to unify the Akan people. He waged several wars against the neighboring states, even conquering the Akwamu, the previously mentioned powerful kingdom in the east. The apex of this came in a decade-long war against the Akyem, which ended in an Asante victory in 1742, which solidified their hold on the Gold Coast. They traded war prisoners, gold, and ivory to the Portuguese, Dutch, and British merchants, monopolizing on European trade. In the latter years of his reign, King Opokaware centralized the empire by increasing the number of subordinates that were ruled directly by the Asante Hene. This led to a series of revolts across the empire from both the provincial chiefs and other peoples like the Wasau, who saw their chance for independence. However, the Asante armies were strong. As European trade ramped up, they began incorporating the use of muskets and rifles into their army and crushed the independence movements. With this, Opokuware, the king who brought the Asante to their highest point, died in 1750. Part 2. The politics of the Asante kingdom were very well structured and defined. At the top, there was the Metropolitan Asante, made up by the Asante Hene and their 8 chief advisors. The king and their council ruled over the entire Asante Confederacy from this position of power. The second division were the Provincial Asante, a group of 7 sub-chiefs known as the Omanhene, which had a general power over the individual provinces of the empire. Then there was the third division, the Local Asante. This third body was a mix of district chiefs and representatives of provinces outside the empire that still pledged loyalty and subservience to the Asante Hene. The previously mentioned Provincial Asante body was divided among the 7 Omanhene, one of which was actually the Asante Hene as well. When assuming kingship, the Asante Hene became the Omanhene of the Kumasi province, known as the Kumasi Hene. For reference, Hene is a suffix that means king or ruler, and Oman means province or state. That being said, the 18 districts of the empire were divided up into 7 states ruled over by the Provincial Asante. These 18 districts were in turn ruled by local chiefs that made up the Local Asante division and served in council to the Omanhene. Early Asante economics were centered around the full exploitation of the natural resources within their borders. Gold mining and farming, the fertile soil, made up the backbone of the economy. In order to carry this out effectively, a complex system of free laborers and slaves were established to efficiently cultivate the land. This process fully developed the agriculture around a subsistence economy, providing food to all those who needed it, and to keep the labor force and population fed on a local level. In terms of gold production, gold extraction was mainly based off of exploiting any gold that was close to the surface, and along riverbeds. The rainy season would flush out any nuggets that were hiding in the area. In terms of economic distribution, the largest of these gold nuggets was confiscated by the Asante Hene to be melted down and turned into currency. This currency was then used to buy seeds and other goods from farmers and laborers, thus investing in the agricultural sector as well as many other individual markets. Part 3. The end of an empire is never swift, and the end of the Asante Confederacy is a legacy that the Akan people still hold to this day. After only 14 years of rule, the Asante Hene Kusi Obadan was deposed and the stool was taken by Ose Kwadwo. His reign began with a series of revolts and rebellions from the Twifo, Wasau, and Akyem people. Though victory was achieved, it came at the cost of a breakdown of the Asante alliance with the Fante kingdom in the south. However, the Asante Hene finished his rule strong by more strictly enforcing the Asante rule on the Gold Coast, making sure the Europeans paid their fair share of taxes to keep their forts and castles. However, as the 19th century came along, the British merchants stormed over the Gold Coast, monopolizing the trade there. They saw the Fante and Denchira as potential alliances to overthrow the empire and take control. In 1824, after years of building tensions, war broke out between the Asante and the British and their allies. A force of 3,000 men were sent by the British governor of Sierra Leone, Sir Charles McCarthy, to crush what he saw as an inferior foe. However, he was quite surprised to find 10,000 men of the Asante army, fully equipped with the latest rifle technology, waiting to massacre his forces. His skull was then promptly turned into a drinking cup for the Asante Hene to drink out of, gold trims along the edge. The Asante then tried multiple times to attack the British positions, but were turned away first by disease and then by British rockets when they tried to attack the defensive position of Accra. With thousands dead on both sides, the Pra River was established as the border between the Asante and the British territory. The Denchira and all other kingdoms became British protectorates, incorporated into the ever-expanding colonial empire. A second war broke out in 1863, but by 1864 it had been fought to a standstill. The Third War was the most decisive in the multi-war and century-long conflict. This time, the British purchased the Dutch Gold Coast colony, interfering with Asante trade. With no choice, the Asante attempted an incursion across the Pra River in 1873, but they were quickly turned back. The British then marched upon the Asante capital of Kumasi. Despite the attempts of the well-equipped Asante army to stop them, the British artillery cleared the way for the troops. The capital Kumasi was abandoned. The troops marveled at its intricacy and were amazed by the wonders of the royal palace. So they did the most British thing imaginable by taking what they could and burning the rest. Actually, the royal palace was blown up with explosives, but nonetheless, the city was left a smoldering ruin in 1874. The Fourth War, which by some sources is counted as a continuation of the Third, take it as you will, began 21 years later, in 1895. With pressure from the expanding French colonies, the British decided it was high time to declare the interior of the Gold Coast as part of their colony. They sent an unofficial request, which was denied in 1891, that coupled with the Asante refusing to have a British representative in Kumasi, eventually led to conflict. The war was short, lasting only a few months. The British Maxim guns tore apart the Asante line infantry. This war officially ended in 1894, when the Asante officially became a British protectorate. It took 70 years to subjugate the Ashanti, and 4 wars as well, but this was still not the end. Tired of subjugation, when the Gold Coast governor insisted upon sitting on the golden stool, the throne and symbol of the Asante people, Queen Mother Ya Asantewa took leadership and attacked British soldiers. The Asante then proceeded to lay siege to a British-held fort in the center of Kumasi, occupying the rest of the city. However, after a month of heavy fighting, a British relief army broke the siege and the war was concluded. The Asante were officially incorporated into the Gold Coast colony on the condition that the Golden Stool remained untouched by any foreigner and that the Asante Hene were allowed to remain. And even after all that, the empire never completely ceased to exist, and to this day, Ose Tutu II, the 16th Asante Hene, sits on the Golden Stool in the Asante region of the country of Ghana. So there you have it. From a small kingdom rising up against their rulers, to the great empire of law, learning, and power, to a state locked in a constant fight for its sovereignty. The Asante Empire has probably been my favorite of all the Africa series to research and write. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.